Cold foods are no longer simply the backup option in the consumer's kitchen. Refrigerated and frozen products are becoming an increasingly important part of how people plan meals, manage budgets, and balance convenience with nutrition. Frozen food sales have grown to more than 87 billion, and nearly one third of consumers say they plan to buy more frozen food in the coming years. At the same time, refrigerated categories like yogurt, cottage cheese, entrees, and sides are seeing strong growth as consumers look for products that deliver protein, convenience, freshness, and flexibility. But perhaps the bigger story for manufacturers and processors is why consumers are turning to these products. And that's what we're here to explore today. I'm Kelly Rodriguez, editor in chief of Refrigerated and Frozen Foods and host of From the Cold Corner, a podcast dedicated to the cold chain. Four industry experts who each see the cold chain from a different vantage point will help us look beyond the numbers and talk about what conditions are really like for manufacturers and processors today, and more importantly, what is coming next. For more on the state of the cold chain, I am joined today by Sally Lyons Wyatt, Global EVP and Chief Advisor of Consumer Goods and Food Service Insights at Circana. With over 30 years of industry expertise, she leverages Circana data to optimize strategies from consumer and media to merchandising and supply chain. Allison Boder, President and CEO of the American Frozen Food Institute, the member-driven national trade association representing the $87 billion frozen food and beverage industry. Allison is working to advance a bold strategic vision to reshape the industry's future, setting a new benchmark for food safety excellence, positioning frozen foods as a powerful solution to food waste, and unlocking new opportunities through advocacy. And representing the manufacturer's side, we have two excellent guests. Kiernan Laughlin, General Manager of Deep Indian Kitchen, which he co-created, launched, and has led across functions since its inception in 2018. Kiernan also serves as EVP of the parent company, Deep Foods, which is among the largest manufacturers of Indian food for the Indian American community since the 1970s. And Megan Torres, who leads brand strategy for deli salads and sides at Reese's Fine Foods, the leading manufacturer in the U.S. with over a dozen production facilities. Megan has nearly 20 years of marketing experience and launching new products, including, most recently, Reese's new lines of chowders, entrees, and high-protein salads. All of this we will talk about today. Thank you all for joining me. I really appreciate your time.
We're excited to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Well, Sally, I want to start with you. You always bring a wealth of knowledge to these conversations, and I'm hoping that you can give us a little level setting snapshot of current industry sales data and shopper insights.
Thank you, Kelly, so much. Today, I want to talk through where refrigerated and frozen stand, what's driving growth, where it's coming from, and really what it means for the audience as they plan for the next few years. There's four signals that are framing what's happening. First, the cold chain is outgrowing the store. Refrigerated and frozen keep adding units while much of total food and beverage is flat to declining. Second, well-being and convenience are the growth engine. Protein, dairy, ready-to-eat meals, or actually ready-to-heat meals, lead every gainer list, and sugar reduction is the claim consumers are actually buying. Third, the at-home kitchen is carrying the category. Growth comes from more households buying more often, not bigger baskets, while substitutes for the center of the plate actually lost trips. And lastly, value is being redefined, not traded down. Store brands take the value gains, club and mass gain trips, and growth holds across every income tier. This isn't a downturn story at all. Everything that follows is going to evidence these four. So just looking at some of the consumer metrics, frozen is up 2.9% in dollars, refrigerated 0.9%. Both grew buyers by about 0.6%, nearly identical. The difference is per trip. Frozen is winning 2.2% more dollars per buyer. Refrigerated is essentially flat. But refrigerated still commands 21% of baskets versus 17.8 for frozen. And refrigerated is the anchor of the shop. Frozen wins more spend each time the shopper engages. The two have different jobs and different strategies, so very important. Now, looking here, we can see that refrigerated grew 0.9% in dollars on 0.8% in units, almost all real volume. Frozen grew 2.9% in dollars and units were 0.4. So frozen's bigger headline carries a meaningful price and mix component. Same direction, two different engines. Compare that to the rest of store. Total food and beverage is 2.5% dollars growth and 0.2% units. General food is up 2.6% in dollars while losing units. And beverages the sharpest, 6.2% in dollars against 1.1% in units. Across much of the store, the dollars are price and units are going backwards. Refrigerated is the closest thing in the building to clean volume-led growth. That's really important. Now here, the page is ranked on absolute unit change. So it's really an honest list of what's moving off the shelf. Yogurt leads at 7.2% units percent change versus year ago. Cottage cheese is a standout, 10.3% units, 17.1% in dollars, a category nobody was talking about 3.5 years ago. And processed poultry, 7.7% increase. The pattern is what matters. Protein leads, ease follows, and flexible ingredients carry both. Fresh eggs does deserve a call out, 6.4% unit growth against a 25% dollar decline. That price normalization after the avian flu, but volume is still fully intact. At the other end, butter and cream cheese are both growing units while losing dollars. The traditional dairy fats still move volume. They just aren't holding price. And that's a margin conversation, not really a demand one. So how much is price? Total food and beverage price per volume is up 1.7. Frozen's up 2.2. Refrigerated is essentially flat. That's the distinction. Frozen stronger dollars are particularly price mix. Refrigerated growth is entirely volume. Yogurt and cheese, cottage cheese are both up over 4% in price and still growing units strongly. Consumers will pay when the product earns it. Meanwhile, whipped toppings and butter are down 6+ % and still losing trips. Price cuts aren't buying loyalty. Food still holds the majority, 55% of refrigerated, and 50% of frozen. But growth, really, when you look at the growth columns, they're the story. In food, refrigerated is down 1.1% and frozen is up only 0.3%. In club, refrigerated is up 1.9% and frozen is up 6.7%. Club holds under 6% share, but growing several times faster as the anchor channel. Yogurt is the clear signal, 8.9% in food, 14% in club, and over 260% when you take a look at pure play e-com. Your volume lives in food. Your growth is being decided in club and mass. Pack architecture has to reflect that. The brand question is more nuanced than the usual private label narrative. Orange numbers are the national brand unit change versus year ago. Pink is private label unit percent change versus year ago. And the purple text is actually looking at private label share. National brands are winning where there's a benefit or a format. Refrigerated entrees up 6.6%. Processed poultry up 6.4%. Refrigerated meat 4.4%. It's protein, produce, and prepared meals are still nationally brand territory. Store brands are taking the staples. They're already dominant there. 73% of fresh eggs, 67% of frozen plain vegetables. The line is clean. Commodity inputs go to store brands. Genuine differentiation holds national brand growth. Differentiate or get commoditized. Claims are where the multiples live. Frozen as a department grew 0.4%. No and low sugar frozen grew 98%. Now it's off a low base, so we have to keep that in mind. Whole grain, 23%. Frozen grew 0.8%. No and low sugar refrigerated grew 40%. Every one of these outgrows its department by multiples, and sugar reduction is by far the largest lane. In frozen, it's wide open. Very few players have moved there at scale, and that is the highest leverage reformulation decision on the board. So let's just decompose where growth comes from. Now, these are detailed pages. You'll be able to get a copy of this, so you'll be able to read it more than what I'm going to share. But if we decompose where the growth comes from, the largest growth is all factors cluster in winning on buyers, frequency, and spend simultaneously. Those are categories like yogurt, dairy milk, refrigerated meat, cottage cheese, broad, healthy growth. A second group grows on frequency plus buyers, and only a handful grow on buyer counts alone. So when you think about it, the category is pulled by household penetration of trip frequency, not by shoppers spending more per occasion. That makes it durable, and it means you can win by earning more weeknights, not necessarily bigger baskets, although both would be great. And then declines. It's really the mirror image. Look at where the frequency column is: frozen breakfast food, substitute meat and seafood, plant-based milk, processed cheese, and all in factors decline for margarine and refrigerated pizza. Almost everyone is a substitute for a traditional center of plate. Consumers are going back to real protein, real dairy, and leaving substitutes behind, unless, of course, they have a dietary need. That's not a price problem. It's a preference shift, and it's worth planning around. Now, this is from one of our brand new solutions, Purchase to Consumption, and one number to hold on to. 49% of frozen items are consumed as a fast meal fix occasion, prepared in under 15 minutes. It's the largest consumption occasion, worth $431 billion. Frozen core value proposition isn't just price, it isn't just shelf life. It's a hot meal on the table in 15 minutes. It's your packaging. If your packaging doesn't sell that in 3 seconds at the shelf, you're leaving your strongest asset on the table. So 6 moves that will decide really who grows over the next 5 years. Growth units first. So you want to focus on being able to grow those units. Dollar growth built on price rolls over. Win the trip, not just the shelf. Club and mass need channel-specific formats. Build for the at-home cook. Design for the weeknight, not the occasion. Reformulate where claim pays off. Sugar reduction is an open lane. Pair a claim consumers will pay more for with a format that flexes across occasions. And put AI to work between signal and shelf. Read demand earlier, simulate reformulation before the line runs, tailor assortment by channel. The cold chain is one of the healthiest parts of the store right now. The question is whether you grow with it or get commoditized inside it. Thank you, Kelly, again, and I look forward to the Q&A portion of the panel.
Sally, thank you as always. I was over here jotting down notes. There's a lot to unpack. I cannot wait. And we've got 2 fantastic manufacturers here to discuss all this. Before we get to that, I want to take a moment and give Allison the stage here to share a little bit about AFI's latest work in regulatory and food safety arenas.
Thank you, Kelly, and thank you, Sally, for setting the stage on really a growing marketplace and a really exciting marketplace for this industry. I'm happy to give some insights into what's happening in Washington, D.C., and how that is affecting the future marketplace, and what we as an industry need to do right now to make sure that the growth potential of the category continues. So I'm going to share some slides now and share some insights from Washington on the policy and regulatory environment in the current Trump administration and here in Washington generally. As you guys are probably familiar, we've got a new dietary guidelines. These were issued earlier this year, and they really flipped the old dietary guidelines on its head And there are some positives in this for frozen, and there are also some watch-outs. This administration is very focused on real food, what they're calling real food, and balancing a very pro-farmer approach to the food supply with an anti so-called UPF also narrative. So really trying to promote healthier eating and doing it in a way that focuses on less processing. And we'll talk about that a little bit because I think there's some real opportunities for frozen in particular in this conversation. Within the dietary guidelines, frozen in particular had a few wins, in particular with broccoli, frozen veg, and fruits were highlighted as products to consume more of. That really isn't a surprise. They've been touted for a long time, but we're always pleased to see that frozen is valued for its long shelf life and its convenience, especially compared to non-frozen formats. When we think about the administration right now, what MAHA comes to mind, the Make America Healthy Again movement. And MAHA is really about pushing policies and encouraging consumers to eat healthier. And they're looking at some very interventionist strategies to do that, moving away from pure education and looking at changing the food environment itself. And what's interesting about this slide, it's a poll from Politico from earlier this year showing that Republicans support federal intervention on diet and health issues more than Democrats. So that's a really important shift. And what it's showing, or the takeaway for us, should be an understanding that this movement is here to stay. There's broad-based support for changes to our food environment. So as companies think about food and health and positioning frozen for the future and R&D, know that the pressure from Washington is probably here to stay. There isn't going to be a release valve here in the 2026 midterms or in the 2028 elections. So this is really a vision for the future and what we should continue to see policy pressures and regulatory initiatives around changing the infrastructure or some of the basic building blocks that we've been that we have in the U.S. food supply.
Allie, this is Miriam. I'm sorry to jump in real quick. The view on my screen is your PowerPoint display, not like the presentation mode itself. So I'm not seeing the full. There we go.
Yeah.
Do it. Well,
I hate to say it. Do we need to go back to the beginning?
Well, no, but it doesn't matter, right? Because they're going to overlay this.
Yeah, I'll have the slides.
I missed that. Okay, I'm sorry. I missed that. Okay. Yep. Sorry for interrupting. Okay.
By doing it this, it helps me see the whole slide.
Got it. Okay. Apologies. That's on me.
Otherwise, it takes up my whole computer. Okay. So let me focus on a couple of initiatives that we're working on at the American Frozen Food Institute. And those relate to the dietary guidelines and really this healthier push for food, but also we're also seeing shifts in environmental movements, I guess. One is this, there's a push to have a definition for ultra-processed foods. What are ultra-processed foods? Today, there is no definition officially by the government, but this movement toward less processing, more whole food ingredients is an area where frozen foods has a lot of opportunity because, as we know, frozen is just a temperature state. It's really not a wholesale change in food. Freezing does not change the composition or the nutrition of food. It simply changes the temperature state. But nevertheless, there's a high focus on processing, and that focus is playing out in the states, with different states creating bans or limitations on what ingredients and or additives can be used in food. States California, Texas, West Virginia, many others are looking at limiting certain ingredients. And that starts to shift the whole food supply such that one manufacturer all of a sudden can't produce a food that can be distributed nationwide. And you're looking at different regulations in every state. It's really an untenable situation. And that plays into the labeling of food. Some of these are actual bans on ingredients, and some of them are labeling pushes. We've also seen states pushing which foods can be purchased with food stamps in the SNAP program. That thus far has not affected frozen or refrigerated to my understanding, but it certainly could in the future. And then we're seeing impacts on EPR, this extended producer responsibility, on what packaging can be used in different states. And again, it's a state-by-state initiative, so it makes it very challenging from a federal or from a national distribution perspective. But we have opportunities at the federal level to work with Congress to make sure that we have a uniform system of labeling food products and also of what ingredients can be used in foods. Food safety also continues to be top of mind in Washington, and we're seeing that over this summer, right? And if we think about the reputation of frozen products, food safety becomes a really critical part to the reputation. It's something we can never let our guard down on. Over the summer with Cyclospora in particular, we're seeing an increase in frozen fruit and vegetable sales, which is great for frozen fruits and vegetables, but not really the way we want to grow the category. And it certainly underscores the need to stay ever vigilant on food safety and to utilize best practices, which is a core tenet of AFI. Real quickly, I'm going to share, these are AFI's core strategic objectives, and you can see the first three that I've got circled there really get at what's happening in Washington, what's happening from an advocacy perspective, as well as food safety and communications. So how do we work on all three of those to grow the category? This is how we're doing that. We're very focused on a core message strategy within Washington with policymakers. That includes the administration, FDA, USDA, as well as members of Congress, to communicate the benefits of frozen. And why do we do that? We do that so that when the administration or policymakers are thinking about new ways to model or to affect the food supply, to encourage consumers to eat healthier, that they're thinking about frozen, and they're making sure that these policies are not barriers to the frozen food supply. So really, we are looking here on how do we cover through our messaging how foods are grown, harvested, and prepared, and then frozen for quality, because we know that freezing locks in nutrients and the freshness of foods. They're affordable for families everywhere, and affordability is going to be a key issue, particularly in the midterms here in November. And they're served everywhere. So they're served in schools, they're served on military bases, they're served in restaurants around the country, they're served in every community in every season. So they're very accessible. And those are the messages that we've been communicating. And we really hope that our members also communicate those messages on the Hill. One of the ways that we do that is we bring food companies to Washington every year to meet with their members of Congress and to meet with the administration to talk about frozen. In May of this year, our members met with members of Congress. We hosted members of Congress to taste frozen food products. And we talked about issues like a uniform national standard for how food ingredients, how their safety is confirmed and how they're labeled. We also talked about the state by state, this growing patchwork of regulations and how we need a federal approach to these. We talked about food safety with members of Congress, reiterating the importance that we place on food safety in our facilities. And we also talked about growing frozen food consumption in federal feeding programs, in particular through frozen fruits in federal nutrition supplemental feeding programs. We've got a bill in Congress right now in the Farm Bill that is going to encourage USDA to increase more frozen fruit and vegetable access in those feeding programs. So there are a lot of ways to get involved, and really this could not be a more important time for the food industry to be engaged in Washington to make sure that the policies that come out of this administration and into the future really support the growth of the frozen food category. There are a lot of ways to get involved, and I hope companies will take the time to learn more.
Allison, thank you so much as always. The work of AFI is vital to the industry, and we know that you all have your ear to the ground there in the Beltway. So never a slow day
Never
day
a dull
for you.
moment.
Right.
That's right.
Well, we've certainly talked a lot about information, the current state of the cold chain, which I love to hear, Sally singing its praises, and I love it when someone else backs me up, and because I always tell people, the perimeter, the cold perimeter is what's growing at your grocery. We are joined by two brands who are doing just that, both Deep and Reese's. Kiernan, I'm going to start with you, and then Megan, I'll have you piggyback. That really the question for both of you is from a brand perspective. How are you all working to meet these evolving consumer expectations? And the 15-minute mandate, and things of that nature. How are you innovating your portfolios? Kiernan, we'll start with you, and then Megan, I'll have you piggyback.
Great. Well, first, thank you to Sally and Allison for some wonderful insights there, and great to hear you speaking our language. We love it. So yeah, I run a business called Deep Brands, which includes Deep Indian Kitchen, which is the #1 frozen Indian brand in America, and a brand called Temtoa, which is the only dedicated frozen Thai brand in America. So we are a family of global flavors brands. And when I think about trends from a brand perspective, we talked about a lot of health trends, which are of course quite prevalent in driving volume in our industry. Clearly, we think one of the trends is also in global flavors. When we think about the trends in global flavors, it's growth is really coming from their premium, authentic, restaurant quality end of the market, which is where we play. So from that perspective, we don't win with functional health claims primarily. However, if you're generally going to be a premium, authentic Indian product or premium, authentic Thai product, by nature, you're going to have higher protein and nutrient density. So that for us is a side effect of being premium and authentic. And while we do, of course, make claims around protein content, that's secondary to our proposition of restaurant quality global flavors that you can recreate in your home in a matter of minutes, right? And if you think about that from a consumer insight perspective, our consumers, who are primarily millennials and Gen Zs, while they may have grown up in a more diverse America than preceding generations, right? They're more likely to have had an Indian friend or a Thai friend. They're more likely to have traveled to those countries. They didn't grow up as natives in those cuisines, right? So they don't inherently know how to make Indian food. They don't inherently know how to make Thai food. So a lot of those ingredients are unfamiliar. A lot of those cooking processes are unfamiliar. And frankly, if you want to make a good chicken tikka masala dish, it can take you 12 hours to really do it the right way. So there's a premium on convenience, and there's a lack of understanding. So there's a really, really strong role for premium global flavors and frozen foods to solve that need gap where the consumer wants that experience at home. They don't necessarily know how to make it themselves, but they can get that flavor experience, and they can also get nutrient density and a really strong meal that adds a little more variety to their routine.
And Megan, what about you all over there at Reese's? I know you're getting ready this fall to launch some new products that reflect a lot of what Sally was saying that you need on that front of pack labeling.
Right. Yeah, no, thank you so much for the opportunity to participate. At Reese's, consumers are really telling us, right, the same story, which is fresh, convenience, and then more and more kind of those nutritional benefits. This is our 76th year. And so we have generations of, connection with consumers through, our deli salads, our freshly prepared sides. A lot of those are more in the comfort food space. And so we continue to evolve those existing lines, right? Because that's what consumers know us for. So maybe we bring in new flavor profiles. Um, but where we really see innovation in that nutritional space is we've been looking at our existing lines and then new lines and saying, okay, how do we speak to the protein that consumers are asking for? How do we speak to fiber? And so, we develop those with the new lines and within our existing. And also, a lot of what we've heard from consumers is looking at also different pack sizes, so smaller portion sizes. We know that, based on GLP-1 usage, a lot of consumers are consuming less. So we think about that in smaller pack sizes or even individual sizing. But yeah, it's looking at those nutrient benefits. We really think that's where we can offer a convenient and fresh solution for consumers.
Well, and I'm glad that you mentioned pack size. That was going to be something a question, for you, Sally, as well. It's interesting in the span of doing this, we've gone from the COVID era multi packs to now a need for a diverse, single servings and multi serves for smaller families. Um, what would your advice be to manufacturers when it comes to the ways in which consumers are defining value?
It really is. We call it knowing your franchise consumer, and it's understanding. I mean, you actually heard Kierman and Megan, excuse me, talk about some of the lifestyle and life stages that they know their core consumer is embracing, and understanding what that means and what will value be to those franchise consumers around everything you just said. So I won't repeat it, but consumers really are latching on to the convenience, the flexibility, but also less waste. And that is one
Mhm.
of the things that frozen and refrigerated can deliver on is helping consumers manage that, get exactly what they want for the occasion that they're preparing for, and less waste. And I think as you think about your franchise consumer and what they're looking for, and be very steadfast on delivering, whether it's the better proteins, whether it's the restaurant quality entrees, whether it's a combination of both, or whatever else it could be, giving that to them in the pack and the size where they might be shopping, because that's different whether you look at mass and club versus dollar versus
Mhm.
grocery. It really does depend. So you've got to be where the consumer is and with that right proposition.
Uh, Speaking of consumers, Allison, one of the interesting parts of some of the AFI research that has come out this year is that a lot of consumers still have misconceptions about frozen food, particularly around things, as you said, it being just a temperature state. How big of a challenge, and this, Allison, I'll ask you first, but anybody can weigh in, certainly Kieran and Megan, how big is a challenge is that consumer education point?
I think consumer education remains really a critical part of what our role is at companies, at associations. Certainly it is at AFI, but where we see the consumer, a driver of consumer information or the reputation of frozen is coming out of Washington. Members of Congress are consumers also. We have RFK Jr. at the helm of HHS, who has made health his number one issue. And he's got a cooking show now. He's got the dietary guidelines. We're going to have a school meals regulation coming out shortly. We've got definitions coming out of FDA. All of those are going to impact the consumer perception of the food supply. And
Right.
within that, we have an incredible opportunity to be very present in that conversation and talk about the specific benefits of frozen in school meals, within affordability, right? Within a $5 a meal entree and feeding your family with the ingredients that we use. So it's hugely important, and it starts in Washington, and sort of with policies that are going to come out of Washington, making sure that we've got the right narrative there.
Well, we certainly love when Washington agrees with us. And Allison hit on a couple of themes around redefining frozen as a culinary powerhouse, and as that relates to affordability. One of the striking stats out there is over the past several years, restaurant food prices have actually risen faster than grocery prices. But at the same time, somehow restaurants have gained share of stomach. So there's a bit of a disconnect there, and we look at that as that's a huge opportunity for frozen food. Particularly, our brands play at the restaurant quality premium end of the spectrum, and consumers are saying, "Hey, your products are as good as better as their restaurant takeout equivalents." If you start to do the math on that, the price points that we sell at and our grocery partners, compare that to Uber Eats or DoorDash. You add the tips, you add the fees. You're looking at about a quarter of the price or less for a frozen meal equivalent to a takeout meal, right? So there's a huge value proposition there that we have in frozen foods. And when we do our research around, what are the triggers and barriers to getting more people to eat premium global flavors meals, this actually comes down to one thing: it's awareness. The trigger is awareness, and the barrier is awareness, right? So once they find out about it, they try it. But if they don't know it's there, they're not going to try it. So I think the frozen aisle has come a long way in meals from the days of when it was perceived as a TV dinner. And there's been a lot of innovation around, global flavors, but also better for you, better quality, better ingredients, cleaner label. And I would argue the products are outpacing the consumer perception. So while we still have some consumers who are driving units coming into this aisle, discovering all the innovation in frozen, there's still a lag in consumer perception in terms of what's there. So the way we have to solve that as an industry and as brands is marketing and it's merchandising, right? And that's a collaboration between our brands and our retailers sometimes, and it's also up to the brands to use their own marketing dollars wisely and communicate appropriately. So it's a huge opportunity in the context of affordability, where we can actually provide the same nutrients, provide the same experience for consumers as restaurants, but at a fraction of the price.
I would just add one more thing, and it's around retail health. There is a big initiative from grocery specifically and other channels too, but grocery has really made it a concerted effort to put retail health initiatives in front and center to help their shoppers find foods and beverages that are going to align to their dietary or nutritional needs, whether they're on GLP-1 or just wanting to live longer, healthier. And partnering with those retailers to help them with that will help that education as well.
Yeah, and I can add one to that. So as I mentioned, one of our focuses on innovation is protein, specifically in the deli salad space, right? There's already chicken salad and tuna salad. But what's interesting is those categories are relatively flat, even though we know consumers are clamoring to get their hands on excellent sources of protein that are convenient and of value. So we have a new line of high protein salads where we're actually leveraging, instead of a mayo-based dressing, we're leveraging a cottage cheese dressing. So it's cottage cheese that's blended super smooth, very thick, very creamy, has a great mouth feel, as a chicken salad dressing. The really great thing about it is it's more protein and it's actually 60% less calories and fat than our other baseline chicken salads, which those have their own audience, but these new high protein chicken salads are meant to bring those consumers over who haven't really discovered portions of the deli, right, as that solution for protein. But kind of getting back to your question about education, that's kind of a complicated story we have to tell to the consumer very quickly of more protein and significantly less calories, so that those who specifically are on a diet where they're really trying to get that protein but with minimal calorie and fat to go along with it, our products, and really our category, right? We're introducing them to the deli salad category for the first time. So That's really a big focus, almost as much as in product innovation, is that how do we communicate this to consumers and working with our in-store, our customer marketing partners at the store level to bring those really great attributes and call outs to consumers.
It has been really there's that cottage cheese mention again. I was at the grocery store yesterday and the cottage cheese shelf was almost entirely wiped out.
Yeah.
We don't have a lot of time left, but I would like to ask each of you, from your kind of angle on the industry, looking beyond some of the things we discussed today and the current trends, what would you look at as sort of the biggest white space for innovation in the cold categories that maybe is not fully tapped? Sally, we'll start with you.
All right. I would actually zero in. I mentioned sugar reduction in frozen. That's one area. But I think the less obvious would be the collapse of the traditional center of plate. Because when I look at the substitutes that they're kind of not doing as well, meaning plant-based milk or processed cheese or margarine. So the industry read is that consumers are looking for that real food and less kind of the substitutes, except for those that need it for dietary reasons. So I don't think we need to abandon, but I would go down and look and for the white space of collapsing traditional center store plate and finding ways of driving that.
That fast meal fix, as you said.
Yes. Yes.
Allison, untapped potential.
I think more communicating about where frozen food comes from and who's making our frozen foods, how they're made. If we can do that, it may not be in the product itself, but how we talk about it, the marketing of the product, the websites that you guys have to support products. How do we share that these are fruits and vegetables that are grown in, on the farm, and they go into a process facility where they are frozen, and then they go on to Kiernan's facility or to Megan's facility. And this is a big kitchen process, but it's a kitchen process, right? This isn't voodoo magic happening in a food facility. It's a big kitchen. And you know what? Consumers don't really know that when they buy something in a package. So we need to be telling them, sharing that story more.
I guess I can go next because I have kitchen in one of my brand names. So I'll build on that. And it's probably not going to be surprising as someone running a global flavors business that I think this is one of the big trends we have coming, and they're just incredible tailwinds there. We've done this research. If you look at what's driven some of the growth in global flavors of the past several years, it's millennials. And now you start to see Gen Zs, they actually index even more highly on global flavors. And it feels weird to think about this, but the oldest Gen Zs are turning 30 next year, right? So they're increasingly growing their discretionary income. A lot of them are about to enter a life stage where they have young families. So that means convenience is at a premium, right? The ability to travel perhaps decreases. So that becomes a real sweet spot for frozen global flavor meals. And at the same time, I talked about that gap between restaurant consumption and frozen consumption. We launched Temtoa, our frozen Thai brand, this year, in part due to the insight that 41% of American consumers like or love Thai food, but overwhelmingly they're getting their Thai food from takeout. Extremely underdeveloped in the frozen aisle. So we looked at that and said, hey, there's some real opportunities here for frozen. And we could have launched, we have Deep Indian Kitchen, we could have launched Deep Thai Kitchen, but at the same time as you're seeing these trends around global flavors from millennials and Gen Zs, you're seeing it dovetail with this trend around authenticity. Now, authenticity is probably one of the most overused words in our industry and others. But when it comes to global flavors, what that means is to a consumer is they want the real deal. They want it to come from the equivalent of their mom and pop local restaurant. They don't want Thai food from an Indian restaurant or Indian food from a Thai restaurant, which if you're trying to replace that restaurant occasion, you're not replacing the TGI Fridays occasion at the premium end or the Applebee's occasion. You're replacing that mom and pop occasion, right? So that means if Global Flavors is going to grow, it's going to come from brands that are not some American brand with a pad thai SKU or an Americanized watered down product. It has to be brands that are dedicated to each cuisine, because in the consumer's mind, that is authenticity, and you can't stand for more than one thing, more than one cuisine authentically if you're playing at the premium end. So we see these incredible tailwinds for Global Flavors, in particular brands that are dedicated to cuisines the way mom and pop restaurants are.
And Megan, last but not least.
Yeah. I would say, I mean, I think the white space that we think a lot about at Research is the entree category within deli. So entrees have just grown year over year. I think people have less and less and less time and are just kind of looking for that, very simple full meal experience. There's plenty of options available, but I think it's a category that's kind of all it's still trying to figure out its space um, in getting what consumers really want, which is that freshness, that quality, and the affordability, while bringing in some of those nutritional benefits, right? So entrees that really focus on protein, entrees that really focus on fiber, um, but still hit the mark on that freshness and the shelf life, right? And affordable. So that's just an area that we continue to work on. We have a new line of pasta entrees that kind of hit the spot of really strong value and uber convenience within that space. It's something that's a little bit different than what's currently there. But we just know that the meal solution of entrees in the deli is something that I think we have a lot of potential still to work through.
Yeah. Well, thank you all so much. We could have probably talked for 2 or 3 hours. I really appreciate your time. Thank you to our panelists, Sally Lyons Wyatt, Allison Boder, Kieran Laughlin, and Megan Torres, for an engaging and informative discussion. I hope you enjoyed this episode of From the Cold Corner, and you can learn more in our annual State of the Cold Chain report at rffmag.com.